So now we're going to be tackling the object called Sennacherib's hexagonal prism. For those of you brothers who don't know, Sennacherib was another king of the Assyrians. He was the son of the king Sargon II. Now, for those of you brothers who don't know, Sargon II, as well as his father Shalmaneser V before him, those were the two who really brought the end of the northern kingdom of Israel by conquering Samaria. It was about a 3 year siege, and in the middle of that siege, Shalmaneser V had passed away, and his son Sargon II, who was the father of the person we're reading today, Sennacherib, basically had completed that siege and conquered the city of Samaria. And after that, deported many of the nobles, the artists, the craftsmen, the musicians, all the great men of learning into the land of the Medes or Media. And I believe this happened around between maybe 718 BC, 720 BC, around that time period. But yeah, before I get into the article, let me just get a close up of the prism. So this is a close up of Sennacherib's prism. Again, this prism, it details the history of the king of Sennacherib and all the many wars that he fought, as well as the people that he conquered. And the reason why I wanted to get into this particular stele is because it actually reveals some very interesting information that I can later expound upon. Okay, Iraq, Nineveh, Neo-Assyrian period, reign of Sennacherib, 689 BC, 500 lines of writing. But let's read. This six-sided hexagonal clay prism, commonly known as the Taylor prism, was discovered among the ruins of Nineveh, the ancient capital of the Assyrian Empire. It contains the annals of Sennacherib himself, the Assyrian king who had besieged Jerusalem in 701 BC during the reign of King Hezekiah. On the prism, Sennacherib boasts that he shut up Hezekiah the Judite within Jerusalem, his own royal city, like a caged bird. This prism is among the three accounts discovered so far which have been left by the Assyrian monarch of his campaign against Israel and Judah. Now, who was Sennacherib? Sennacherib in Akkadian means sin, which sin was one of the moon gods. Uh, by the way, this is just a quick aside because I do remember from my understanding of history, the worship of the god Sin was actually what led to the fall of Babylon to a degree. Because I believe, trying to remember the king who was ruling Babylon at that time, but during that time period, the Babylonians had worshipped the sun god, and this king decided to worship the moon god Sin, and because of that, there was a lot of contention between that ruling king and basically the high priest of Babylon. So by the time that Cyrus, who was the Mede, came and wanted to conquer basically Babylon, the priesthood basically welcomed them with open arms. But that's just one event of the story, and I'm not trying to digress too much. I wish I could just recall the name of the king, but y'all brothers who read the scriptures, y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Continuing on, Sennacherib was one of the most powerful monarchs in the history of the world. He was king of Assyria and the son of Sargon. He inherited the vast empire from his father and ascended the throne on the 12th day of Abib or Abe, July to August, 705 BC. Sennacherib was the king who besieged Jerusalem during the reign of King Hezekiah of Judah. And for those of you brothers who are aware of this siege that happened during the time of King Hezekiah in Judah, it was actually through the prophet Isaiah uh, and the behest of the Most High, angels came and protected basically the city of Jerusalem from that great destruction. Continue on. The Taylor prism was discovered among the ruins of the ancient city Nineveh by Colonel Taylor in 1830. Of all the Assyrian documents that have come down to us, not one is in better preservation than this. Henry Austin later found the royal palace of Sennacherib and many other archaeological treasures. The work of Laird was continued here and at other sites until 1847. In 1849, he began another exploring expedition which lasted 3 years. Laird had become popular in Britain as he gave persuasive scholarly accounts of his discoveries to the public, making remarkable comparisons with the Bible. And again, we see another historical artifact that was discovered in the early to mid 1800s. That's what a lot of these scholars did. They would go to these certain regions either to disprove the Bible if they were maybe an atheist or an agnostic, or to prove the events of the Bible if they were a conservative Christian, especially at that time period. But of course, when they discovered the truth of who those people actually were, that's when they were just like, you know what? We can't allow these artifacts to be known by the masses of people. That's why shit like this you're not going to see in a history book. In 1878, Hormuzd Razan, the Assyrian archaeologist from 1826 to 1910, had resumed work for the British Museum at Nineveh after Henry Austin Layard's excavation in 845 for the British Museum at the Mounds of Nimrud. There were clay tablets discovered in great quantities in Rassam without knowing it. Unearthed at Nineveh a portion of the famous library of Ashurbanipal. The palace at Nineveh was decorated with massive stone walls, panels depicting the siege of Lachish. These can be seen today at Lachish Gallery in the British Museum. Now, this siege of Lachish is actually a key siege. For those of you brothers who don't know, Lachish was one of the fortress cities of the kingdom of Judah, one of the cities that Sennacherib had conquered. And we're going to see some depictions of that siege a little bit later. Continuing on. In 1919, J.H. Brersted purchased the Taylor Prism for the Oriental Institute in Chicago from a Baghdad antiques dealer. Language Akkadian. Medium clay prism, 38 centimeters high, 6 columns, 500 lines, approximate date 689 BC. And for biblical references, you can go to 2 Kings 18:13 and through 1937, or Isaiah 36:1 through 37:38. And both of these biblical references is in a reference to what I mentioned earlier about the prophet Isaiah, through the power of the Most High, delivering Hezekiah during that siege. Continue on, see a look at the cuneiform, the account recorded on the prism. On the 6 inscribed sides of this clay prism, King Sennacherib recorded 8 military campaigns undertaken against various peoples who refused to submit to Assyrian domination. In all instances, he claims to have been victorious. As part of the 3rd campaign, he besieged Jerusalem and imposed heavy tribute on Hezekiah, king of Judah, a story also related in the Bible, where Sennacherib is said to have been defeated by the angel of the Lord, who slew 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. Here's an exact rendering of Sennacherib's haughty introduction, declaration about himself, and his 3rd campaign. But let's read. Sennacherib, the great king, the mighty king, king of the world, king of Assyria, king of the 4 quarters, the wise shepherd. Now, this is an example for those of you brothers, I'm sure, who know about history are aware of this. In the ancient world, the kings considered themselves basically divine, given the divine right to rule. They considered themselves gods on earth, lords on earth, kings on earth. Basically, they were extensions of a Nimrod, whether in whatever form it was, whether it was Marduk, the god of war, or Osiris or Horus. All these kings of the basically of the pagan societies all trace their lineage back to that great king, that great shepherd. That's why Sennacherib himself refers to himself as a wise shepherd. And for the 4 quarters of the earth, that's just a use of euphemism. They meant all of the earth, at least at that time period. But continue on. The wise shepherd, favorite of the great gods, guardian of right, lover of justice, who lends support, who comes to the aid of the destitute, who performs pious act, perfect hero, mighty man, first among all princes, the powerful one who consumes the insubmissive, who strikes the wicked with the thunderbolt, the god of Sur, the great mountain, an unrivaled kingship has entrusted me. You see how he's giving himself godlike qualities when he's referring to strikes the wicked with the thunderbolt. That's because in the ancient world, the great gods, whether they be Baal or Zeus or Marduk or Moloch, not only were they great gods of fire, but also they were considered sky gods, and the thunderbolt was their chief weapon. So basically, by him saying that he was destroying the wicked with the thunderbolt, he's giving himself godlike qualities. Even the Most High of the Scriptures as well, his judgment can be likened unto the great thunderbolt. But continuing on. See. An unrivaled kingship has entrusted to me, and above all those who dwell in palaces has made powerful my weapons, from the upper sea of the setting sun to the lower sea of the rising sun. He has brought the black-headed people in submission at my feet. I'm going to repeat that one more time. He has brought the black-headed people in submission at my feet. Maybe one more time, because I know some niggas are a little bit slow. He has brought the black-headed people in submission at my feet, And mighty kings feared my warfare, leaving their homes and flying alone, like the Sidnu, the bird of the cave, to some inaccessible palace. Again, so this is in reference to his third campaign, and we know during his third campaign, like read above, that's when he conquered Lachish, and that's when he went to make his move against Jerusalem, as well as many other nations. So, what is this letting you know? All of the people that existed in that Mediterranean region, what we call the East today, were black skinned, quote unquote, Negroid people, all of them, every single one of them. But continuing on, in my third campaign, I went against the Hittite landlord, king of Sidon. The terrifying splendor of my sovereignty overcame him, and far off in the midst of the sea he fled. There he died. Great Sidon, Little Sidon, Brit Seti, Zaribtu, Malahiba, Ushu, Askib, Akko, his strong walled cities where there were fodder and drink for his garrisons. The terrors of the weapon of Assur, my lord, overpowered them, and they bowed in my submission at my feet. I ceded to Balu on the royal throne over them, and tribute gifts for my majesty I impose upon him for all time without ceasing. So again, that's just what happened in the ancient world. When a city was conquered, you either get completely wiped out or you would submit and pay tribute uh, to the ruling king. And I'm sure for those of you brothers who read the scriptures, especially Revelations, when the nation of Israel is restored as a nation and put in rulership amongst all the earth, that's going to happen once again. I believe it's Revelation 21, maybe verse 19. It mentions how the riches of the Gentiles are going to flow incessantly into the great city. But for those of you brothers who read the scriptures, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Scroll down. I want to get to the point about Hezekiah. There we go. As for Hezekiah, the Judahite, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong walled cities, as well as the small towns in the area, which were outnumbered by leveling with battering rams, and by bringing up siege engines, and by attacking and storming on foot, by mines, tunnels, and breaches, I besieged and took them. 200,000, 150 people, great and small, male and female, horses, mules, asses, camels, cattle, and sheep without number. I brought away from them and counted as spoil. Hezekiah himself, like a caged bird, I shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city. I threw up earthworks against him, the one coming out of the city gate. I turned back to his misery. His cities, which I had despoiled, I cut off from his land. Into Metini, god of Ashdod, Padi, king of Ingram, and Stilabil, king of Gaza, I gave them, and thus I diminished his land. I added to the further tribute and laid upon him the surrender of their land and imposts, gifts for my majesty. As for Hezekiah, the terrifying splendor of my majesty overcame him, and the Arabs and his mercenary troops which he had brought in to strengthen Jerusalem, his royal city, deserted him. In addition to the 30 talents of gold and 800 talents of silver, gems, antimony, jewels, large cornelians, ivory inlaid couches, ivory inlaid chairs, elephant hides, elephant tusks, ebony, boxwood, all kind of valuable treasures, as well as his daughters, his harem, his male and female musicians. And by the way, for the male and female musicians, those would have been from the tribe of Levi, because I know for those of you who read the scriptures, it tells you during the rulership of David that he trained the Levites how to play the harp and to sing as well. But continuing on, which he had brought after me to Nineveh, my royal city, to pay tribute and to accept servitude, he dispatched his messengers. Now, of course, a lot of these kings have great pride, so I'm sure he doesn't want to mention here how his army was destroyed by an angel of the Lord. And of course, that's only just meant for us in the knowledge who actually hearken into the scriptures to understand. Continuing on. The best way to see the accuracy of the biblical account with this record of Sennacherib's prison is to compare 2 Kings 18:13 through 19, 2 Kings 18:13 through 19:37 and Isaiah 36:1 through 37:38 with the last paragraph on the above account. A mystery of history. After comparing the biblical account with that of the Sennacherib prison, one scripture stands out above all the rest, which remains a mystery even to today. It is also recorded in the book of Kings, along with the book of Isaiah. It is the part where Isaiah gives a word of the Lord, gives a word from the Lord just after King Hezekiah's awesome prayer. Let's read. Therefore, thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into the city, nor shoot an arrow there, nor come before with his shield, nor build a siege mount against it by the way that he came. By the same shall he return, and he shall not come into the city, says the Lord, for I'll defend this city, to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. Then the angel of the Lord went out and killed in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when people arose early in the morning, there were the corpses all dead. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went away, returned home, and remained at Nineveh. This miracle cannot be substantiated by archaeological discoveries for a reason of which only God knows. But all the pieces seem to fit together because even today, no one has determined exactly why Sennacherib did not even enter Jerusalem with his great army once it was besieged. And honestly, even if the information was out there in a stele or in some type of a document, they would just keep it hidden in some type of library because they don't want to give overt credit to the Bible. They'll give a little bit of credit to the historicity of the Bible, but they don't want to give credit to any of the spiritual events. So if there was any type of record written by anybody that demonstrated that this biblical event happened, no way that they would let the masses of people know. No possible way. But continue on. After reading his campaigns on his prison, it would seem that this was the thing he had intended to do, and with all anxiety. Another revealing fact is this. At this point in time, there was an abrupt discontinuance of Assyria's western invasion. Sennacherib, during his later reigns, made no expedition further westward than Sicily, nor were the Assyrian designs against southern Syria and Egypt resumed till toward the close reign of Esarhaddon. Yeah, but let's continue reading. Herodotus, the father of ancient Greek history, records what is probably an Egyptian legend that grew out of this historical event. He suggests that Sennacherib's fighting force was greatly reduced when in one night a plague of field mice gnawed the quivers, bowstrings, and shield straps of his soldiers, thus making them suddenly vulnerable to their enemies. Josephus quotes the Chaldean historian Berosus as follows. Now when Sennacherib was returning from his Egyptian war at Jerusalem, he found his army under Rabshakeh, his general, in danger by a plague. For God had set a pestilence distemper upon his army, and on the very night of the siege 100 fourscore and 5,000 with their captains and generals were destroyed. But the account of his death may give us some sort of distant light as to this miracle and the possibility of his great army being utterly routed. So again, these are just different historical interpretations of that event, whether an angel of the Lord went directly and killed the man, or maybe it was a disease that plagued them. We weren't there to see the exact historical, basically, event taking place, but at the end of the day, we do understand, at least according to the scriptures, whatever event happened to Sennacherib's men, it was through the auspice of the Lord. Continuing on, one interesting note worth investigating further is where the biblical records what happened to Sennacherib once he returned to Nineveh without his great army. In reviewing the background of this situation, King Hezekiah was intensely concerned about the armies of the Assyrian king Sennacherib. He sent his servants to inquire about the prophet Isaiah just exactly what the Lord was saying that he needed to do. Once his servants had found Isaiah, he said, 2 Kings 19:6 and 7, and Isaiah said to them, Thus you shall say to your master, Thus says the Lord, do not be afraid of the words which you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria will have blasphemed me. Surely I will send a spirit upon him, and he shall hear a rumor and return to his own land, and I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. The book of Kings goes on to record what actually happened to Sennacherib once he returned to his capital, Nineveh. Now it came to pass as Sennacherib, was worshipping in the temple of Narash, his god, that his sons Adramelech and Sharesh struck him down with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Iraq. Then Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place. This exact same account was unearthed, having been recorded in a clay tablet now in the British Museum. On the 20th day of the month of Tebet, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, his son slew him in rebellion. Esarhaddon, his son, sat on the throne of Assyria. And I know I've been going along about these different historical events, but I just wanted to paint a picture of basically the king Sennacherib, his reign, and what happened to him, what caused his downfall, how ultimately he was for coming against the Lord. But going back to an earlier point, I know earlier in the article, it might have been several minutes ago actually, it mentioned that Sennacherib had conquered many cities of the Israelites. A specific one I want to focus on is Lachish, because there's actually plenty of historical evidence as well as basically murals that depict that siege of Lachish, and we're going to see how the people looked in those images. Okay, here we have an Assyrian relief. This is after Sennacherib conquered the city of Lachish with the black-skinned people. As you can see, these men paying obeisance to King Sennacherib. These were all Judahites or men of Judah, as you can see. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. You see how they have the woolly hair and the woolly beards, thick noses. All these men right here are so-called black men. And again, these are men of the tribe of Judah. Here's a close-up of the image of the men of the tribe of Judah uh, giving obeisance to the king, and you can tell that they're men giving obeisance to the king because you see the one man bowing down, you see another man on his knees with his palms open, which is basically a sign of submission. Again, this is another image from the palace of Sennacherib. It says Levantine prisoners, probably from Phoenicia or Hebrews playing the lyre. Now, it says probably from Phoenicia or Hebrews. I'll tell you right now, these are Hebrews, mostly of the southern kingdom. You can tell because just like we read in the prism earlier, when Sennacherib conquered the certain cities of the Israelites, they took the musicians, both male and female. As you can see, these are the men playing the lyre. So most likely they were of the tribe of Levi. Right here is another image. These are of the Assyrians, specifically the archers, while they're sieging the town of Lachish. As you can see with the men, woolly hair, woolly beards. Some of them even have dreadlocks. So it lets you know that the Assyrians as well were men of color. Now, this is another picture. It might be harder for you to see. This is also during the siege of Lachish. Let me zoom in. These are certain men being hanged, as you can tell. A little bit closer. It's a little bit harder to see, but you can still somewhat see the woolly beards of these men being hanged. So again, these were also so-called black men. Here's another image of the quote-unquote musicians or the Levites. As you can see how the brothers have the cornrows and the beard, and they're playing the lyres, the instruments. This lets you know these are Israelite musicians, specifically the Levites. Let me see if I can zoom in on this image. Show brothers a better look. You see the image? See how the men have the cornrows, the beard. These are clearly the men of color, black men. So all you brothers who are, struggling with family members and friends, trying to get to understand the truth of history, just trying to wake them up, show them some of these images, because man, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So there's only so much you can say before they basically brush you off as a conspiracy theorist. But when you show them the actual images, and when you show them that these images have been around since the 1800s and it's been well known to scholars, it's just that the average nigga doesn't know shit. That'll help them understand truly the condition of the battle. But I got a few more images that I want to show. Here's another Assyrian relief. As you can see, these are Hebrews being thrown into exile. You see the Assyrian king. I mean, not Assyrian king, the Assyrian soldier and the men of Israel. Again, you can see the braided hair and what I call the beanies that they got on their heads. Now, here's another image as well. I'm sure many of you brothers who have been in the knowledge have probably seen this image a dozen times. As you can see, two Israelite men. Now, if these aren't Negroes, I don't know what are. I mean, look at them. They got the braids. Literally looks like they got the two-strand twist. They got the woolly beards. Then you see the Assyrian man behind them with the woolly beard and the long braids as well. Just based on how they're dressed, most likely they're probably some type of a land worker, maybe a fisherman, maybe a field worker, a hard laborer. You can just tell by how they're dressed. They don't seem to be nobility. I don't see any fringes or anything like that on them. They're well built as well, so you can tell they're probably working men. This right here is another image of an Assyrian. As you can see, just looking at his facial features, the strong nose, the prominent lips, is clearly a man of color. Yeah, but real quick, I just want to go back to this original image again as a backdrop, just for you brothers who don't clearly see it again. Zooming into these men, all these men in this image are so-called men of color. And again, like it says below, this is after the conquest of the Judean city of Lachish. So this is prior to Sennacherib basically coming to conquer the city of Jerusalem. But it's just amazing how the time we live in with all this knowledge and information, how so many people are just unaware of these things too. And really, these are the type of things that empower you. Right here, what you're seeing. This is real Black history. This is true Black history, not that bullshit that we're taught every day. About Martin Luther King and white people and Black people holding hands, and Rosa Parks sat on a bus, and W.E.B. Du Bois and George Washington Carver. Now, I'm not trying to belittle those men and women and what they did, but honestly, that's just their history is really just used to narrow our mindset and basically only have us focus on honestly the last 150 years. Prior to that, black men, you were a slave. You worked and you did nothing. You had no history. You had no rulership. You didn't do anything of importance. So just focus on these things in Black History Month as opposed to things that are truly edifying and can truly uplift you, man. So that's why it's very important for all you brothers out there to have a great understanding of history, because when you have that understanding of history, you'll be able to not be deceived or not get caught up in your emotions based on whatever image is being portrayed on the television, man. All right, brothers. But with that being said, I'm gonna close this series. Y'all have a great rest of your day.